My name is Emily Parker, and I still remember the day we moved into our new house like it was yesterday. The sun was shining, boxes were stacked everywhere, and I was bubbling with excitement. I kept asking my husband, David, if he thought we'd made the right choice. He just laughed, ruffling my hair like I was being silly. But then, his face turned serious, and he leaned in close. Emily, don't trust the neighbors, he whispered, his eyes darting toward the house next door. I thought he was joking, but something in his voice made me shiver. Why would he say that? What did he know that I didn't? As we unpacked, I tried to shake off David's warning. Maybe he was just being overprotective, or maybe he'd read too many mystery novels. Still, every time I glanced at the house next door, I felt a strange flutter in my stomach. The Millers lived there, and I'd only seen them from a distance, just shadows moving behind curtains. I wondered what they were like. Were they friendly? Or was there something about them that made David so uneasy? Later that afternoon, as I was arranging books on the living room shelf, the doorbell rang. I jumped, my heart pounding. David was in the garage, so I wiped my hands on my jeans and hurried to the door. When I opened it, I found Tom and Linda Miller standing on the porch, both smiling wide. Tom was tall and had a booming voice that filled the air. "Welcome to the neighborhood," he said, handing me a plate of cookies. Linda stood beside him, quiet and watchful, her eyes never quite meeting mine. They asked a lot of questions, where we were from, what we did, if we had any kids. It felt like they wanted to know everything about us, and their smiles seemed just a little too big, a little too forced. I thanked them for the cookies, but as soon as I closed the door, I felt uneasy. Why did Tom keep glancing at our house, as if he was searching for something? And why did Linda barely speak, only nodding and watching me with those sharp, careful eyes? I tried to tell myself I was being silly, but David's warning echoed in my mind. Don't trust the neighbors.
What did he mean by that?
Was he just being cautious, or was there something he wasn't telling me? That night, as I lay in bed, I couldn't sleep. Every creak and groan of the house made me jump. I kept thinking about the Millers' questions, their strange smiles, and the way Linda's eyes seemed to follow me even after I closed the door. I wondered if David knew something about them that I didn't. Maybe he'd seen something strange before we moved in. Or maybe he just had a bad feeling. Either way, I couldn't stop thinking about what might be happening next door. The next morning, I peeked through the curtains, hoping to catch a glimpse of the Millers. Their house looked perfectly normal, flowers in the garden, a car in the driveway, and a flag waving in the breeze. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Why did I feel like someone was watching me? And what would I find if I looked a little closer? I had no idea that this was just the beginning, and that the real mystery was only starting to unfold. What were the Millers hiding, and why did David seem so sure we couldn't trust them? I was about to find out, but I had no idea how deep the secrets next door would go. I woke up the next morning still thinking about the Millers and David's warning. The cookies they'd given us sat untouched on the kitchen counter. I stared at them, wondering if I was being silly for feeling so uneasy. But I couldn't forget the way Tom's eyes had darted around our house, or how Linda had barely spoken. I told myself I'd give it time, that maybe I was just nervous about being in a new place. But as the days went by, little things started to happen that made me question everything. At first, it was just small stuff. Packages I ordered online would disappear from our porch before I could bring them inside. I asked David if he'd seen them, but he just shook his head and told me to be careful. "People steal packages all the time," he said, but I could tell he was thinking about the Millers. I tried to brush it off, but then I started hearing strange noises at night, soft thumps, muffled voices, and once, what sounded like someone whispering right outside our window. I'd sit up in bed, heart pounding, but when I looked outside, there was nothing there. Was it just my imagination, or was someone really out there, watching us? David grew more insistent about keeping our distance from the Millers. He started locking all the doors and windows before bed, double-checking them twice. "Just be careful, Emily," he'd say, his voice low and serious. "We don't know these people." I wanted to believe he was just being protective, but the way he looked at the house next door made me wonder if he knew something I didn't. Every time I tried to ask, He'd change the subject or tell me not to worry. But how could I not worry when every night felt a little stranger than the last? One afternoon, as I was watering the flowers in our front yard, Mrs. Jenkins shuffled over from across the street. She was an older lady with sharp eyes and a voice that always sounded like she was sharing a secret. She leaned in close and whispered, "Strange goings-on at the Miller's place, you know. Always has been." I tried to laugh it off, but she just nodded, her eyes never leaving the Miller's house. "You keep your eyes open, dear. Not everything is as it seems around here." Her words sent a chill down my spine. What did she mean by strange goings-on? Was she just gossiping? Or was there something she'd seen that I hadn't? That night, I lay awake, listening to the house settle and the wind rustle the trees outside. Every sound seemed louder, every shadow darker. I kept thinking about the missing packages, the noises at night, and Mrs. Jenkins' warning. Was I just letting my imagination run wild? Or was there really something wrong with the Millers? I wanted to talk to David about it, but he seemed more closed off than ever, always watching the house next door with a worried look. The next morning, I found muddy footprints on our back porch. They were too big to be mine, and David said he hadn't been outside. I stared at them, my mind racing. Who had been in our yard?
And why?
I felt a knot of fear growing in my stomach. I knew I couldn't ignore the signs any longer. Something was happening next door, something that was starting to reach into our own lives. But what was it? And how much did the Millers really know about us? I was determined to find out, even if it meant getting closer to the neighbors David warned me never to trust. What would I discover if I crossed that line? After finding those muddy footprints on our back porch, I couldn't stop thinking about what, or who, might have been in our yard. The fear and curiosity tangled together inside me, making it impossible to focus on anything else. I kept replaying Mrs. Jenkins' warning in my mind, and every time I glanced at the Miller's house, I wondered what secrets might be hiding behind their closed doors. I knew David wanted me to stay away, but the more he warned me, the more I felt like I had to know the truth. What if the answers to all these strange things were right next door? A few days later, Tom Miller showed up at our door with a big, friendly grin and an invitation. "We're having a barbecue this Saturday," he said, his voice booming with fake cheer. "You and David should come. It'll be fun to get to know each other." I hesitated, remembering David's warning and the way Tom's eyes always seemed to be searching for something. But I also remembered the muddy footprints, the missing packages, and the way Linda Miller had watched me with those sharp, nervous eyes. Maybe if I went, I could finally figure out what was really going on. I smiled and told Tom we'd be there, even though my heart was pounding in my chest. When Saturday came, David tried to talk me out of going. "Emily, please," he said, his voice tight with worry. "Let's just keep to ourselves." But I shook my head. "I need to know, David. I need to see for myself." He sighed and finally agreed to come with me, but I could tell he was on edge the whole time. The Miller's backyard was filled with the smell of grilled food and the sound of laughter, but something about it all felt forced, like everyone was pretending to be happier than they really were. Tom was everywhere at once, making jokes and flipping burgers, but his eyes kept darting toward the house, as if he was worried about what someone might see. Linda was even quieter than usual, barely speaking above a whisper. When I tried to talk to her, she just smiled nervously and said, "Some things are better left alone, you know. Secrets keep us safe." Her words sent a chill down my spine, and I wondered what kind of secrets she was talking about. As the evening went on, I excused myself to use the bathroom. Inside the house, I noticed several doors were locked, even though it was just a family barbecue. I tried not to stare, but one door at the end of the hallway caught my eye. It looked older than the others, with scratches around the handle, as if someone had tried to force it open. Just as I was about to get closer, Tom appeared behind me, his smile gone. "That's just the storage room," he said quickly, steering me back toward the kitchen. Nothing interesting in there. But the way he said it made me even more curious. What was he hiding behind that door? Back outside, I watched Linda as she nervously picked at her food, glancing at Tom every few minutes. I could feel the tension between them, like they were both keeping a secret they were afraid to share. I left the barbecue with more questions than answers, my mind racing with possibilities. What was behind that locked door? Why did Linda seem so scared? And what would happen if I pushed just a little further? I knew I was getting closer to the truth, but I had no idea how dangerous things were about to become. What would I risk to uncover the secrets next door? After the barbecue at the Miller's house, I couldn't stop thinking about that locked door and the way Tom had rushed to steer me away from it. Linda's nervous words echoed in my mind. Secrets keep us safe. I lay awake that night, replaying every detail, the forced laughter, the locked doors, the way Tom's smile had vanished when he caught me in the hallway. I felt like I was standing on the edge of something big, something I wasn't supposed to see. But the more I tried to let it go, the more I needed to know what was really happening next door. The days that followed were tense. David noticed how distracted I was and tried to comfort me, but I could tell he was worried too. He kept checking the locks and peeking through the curtains, his jaw tight with worry. "Emily, I mean it," he said one night as we got ready for bed. "Stay away from the Millers. There's something off about them. I don't want you getting mixed up in whatever it is." But I couldn't help myself. Every time I looked at their house, I felt like it was calling to me, daring me to find out the truth. Then one night, everything changed. I was up late, reading in the living room, when I heard a strange noise outside, a heavy, dragging sound, like something being pulled across the driveway. My heart started pounding as I crept to the window and peeked through the blinds. There, in the pale glow of the streetlight, I saw Tom Miller struggling to drag a large, lumpy bag from the trunk of his car into the garage. He kept glancing over his shoulder, as if he was afraid someone might see him. The bag looked heavy, and I couldn't help but wonder what could possibly be inside. My mind raced with possibilities, each one more frightening than the last. I watched as Tom disappeared into the garage, the door slamming shut behind him. For a moment, everything was quiet. Then, I heard muffled voices, angry, desperate, and low. I couldn't make out the words, but I recognized Linda's voice, trembling and scared. I pressed my ear to the window, straining to hear, but all I caught was the sound of something crashing to the floor. My hands shook as I pulled away from the glass. What was happening in that garage? Was Linda in danger? Or was she part of whatever secret the Millers were hiding? A few minutes later, I saw Linda slip out the back door, her face streaked with tears. She stumbled into the backyard, clutching her arms around herself as if she was trying to hold herself together. I wanted to run outside and ask if she was okay, but I was frozen with fear. Instead, I watched as she sank down onto the porch steps, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. The sight of her crying made my heart ache, but it also made me more determined than ever to find out what was going on. Just then, I felt a hand on my shoulder and nearly jumped out of my skin. It was David, his face pale and serious. "Emily, what are you doing?" he whispered, pulling me away from the window. "You can't keep spying on them. It's not safe." I tried to explain what I'd seen, but he just shook his head, his eyes dark with worry. "I told you not to get involved. Whatever's happening over there, it's not our business." But I could see the fear in his eyes, and I knew he was just as curious and scared as I was. That night, I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Tom dragging that bag, Linda crying in the dark, and the locked door at the end of the Miller's hallway. I kept wondering what was inside the bag, what secrets were hidden behind that door, and why Linda seemed so afraid. I knew David wanted to protect me, but I couldn't ignore the feeling that something terrible was happening right next door. The mystery was pulling me in, and I didn't know how to stop. The next morning, I tried to act normal, but every sound made me jump. I kept glancing at the Miller's house, half expecting to see police cars or hear sirens. But everything looked quiet and ordinary, as if nothing had happened at all. I wondered if I'd imagined it, if my mind was just playing tricks on me. But then I remembered the look on Linda's face, the fear in her eyes, and I knew it was real. I realized I had a choice. I could listen to David and stay away, or I could follow my instincts and try to uncover the truth. I knew the risks, but I also knew I couldn't live with myself if I ignored what I'd seen. What if someone was in danger? What if the Miller's secret was bigger and scarier than I ever imagined? I was about to find out, but I had no idea just how far I'd have to go, or what I'd have to risk, to get the answers I needed. What would I discover if I kept digging? And would I be ready for the truth when I finally found it? After that night, I couldn't shake the images from my mind. Tom dragging that heavy bag, Linda crying in the shadows, and David's worried face as he pulled me away from the window. I knew I should listen to him, but the mystery next door was like a puzzle I couldn't stop trying to solve. Every time I looked at the Miller's house, I felt a mix of fear and curiosity, like I was standing on the edge of something dangerous but important. I kept asking myself, what if someone really needed help? What if I was the only one who could see the truth? The next day, I decided I couldn't do this alone. I needed someone who knew the neighborhood, someone who might have seen things I hadn't. That's when I thought of Mrs. Jenkins. She always seemed to know what was happening on our street, and her warning about strange goings-on at the Miller's house still echoed in my mind. I found her tending her roses, and after a few nervous glances to make sure no one was listening, I told her everything I'd seen, the bag, the arguments, Linda's tears. Mrs. Jenkins listened closely, her eyes growing wide. "I knew it," she whispered. "I've seen people coming and going from their house late at night. Not family, not friends. Strangers. And always, they go straight to the basement."
Her words sent a chill through me.
I realized I'd never seen the Millers use their basement door during the day, but sometimes, late at night, I'd noticed a faint light glowing from the small window near the ground. Mrs. Jenkins and I decided to keep watch together. We took turns peeking through our curtains, jotting down notes about who came and went. It felt a little silly at first, like we were playing detective, but the more we watched, the more we saw. The Millers had visitors almost every night, people who never stayed long, who always looked around nervously before slipping inside. One night, as I was checking our backyard, I noticed something strange near the fence. At first, I thought it was just a birdhouse or a garden ornament, but when I got closer, I realized it was a small black camera pointed straight at our house. My heart raced as I crouched down to look at it.
Who had put it there?
Was it the Millers? Were they watching us, just like we were watching them? I felt a wave of fear and anger. Suddenly, the mystery wasn't just about what was happening in their house. It was about what they might know about us. I showed the camera to David, hoping he'd finally see how serious this was. He was furious, but also scared. "This is getting out of hand, Emily," he said, his voice shaking. "We need to call the police." But I wasn't sure. What if we were wrong? What if the Millers had a reason for everything, and we were just making things worse? Still, I couldn't ignore the feeling that we were being watched, that the line between our lives and theirs was getting thinner every day. Mrs. Jenkins and I kept up our watch, growing more anxious with every late-night visitor and every strange noise from the Millers' basement. I started to notice other things, too, like how Linda always seemed jumpy, flinching at loud sounds, and how Tom's friendly smile had disappeared, replaced by a hard, watchful stare. Sometimes, I'd catch Linda looking at me from her kitchen window, her eyes pleading, as if she wanted to say something but couldn't. One evening, as I was writing down the license plate of a car parked outside the Miller's house, I saw Tom come out and look straight at me. For a moment, we just stared at each other, the air thick with tension. Then he turned and went back inside, slamming the door behind him. I felt a shiver run down my spine. Did he know what I was doing? Was I in danger now, too? That night, I lay awake, clutching the covers and listening for any sound from next door. I kept thinking about the camera, the visitors, and the secrets hidden in the Miller's basement. I wondered if Linda was trying to reach out to me, or if she was just as trapped as I felt. I knew I was getting closer to the truth, but I also knew the risks were growing. What would happen if the Millers found out I was watching them? And what would I do if I finally uncovered the secret they were so desperate to keep? I didn't have the answers yet, but I knew I couldn't stop now. The mystery had become a part of my life, and I was determined to see it through, no matter how dangerous it might be. What would I find if I kept digging? And would I be ready for the truth when it finally came out? The next step would change everything, and I could feel it coming closer and closer with every passing night. After discovering the hidden camera in our backyard and seeing Tom's cold stare, I knew things were reaching a breaking point. The line between curiosity and danger had blurred, and I felt it every time I looked out the window or heard a noise at night. Mrs. Jenkins and I kept up our watch, but now it felt less like a game and more like a race against time. I was scared, but I couldn't stop. The Miller's secret was so close, I could almost touch it, and I knew that if I didn't act soon, I might never get another chance. One evening, as the sun was setting and the shadows grew long, I saw Linda Miller standing alone in her backyard. She looked lost, her arms wrapped tightly around herself, her eyes darting nervously toward her house. I felt a surge of courage and slipped outside, my heart pounding. I called her name softly, and she jumped, startled. For a moment, I thought she might run away, but then she looked at me with tears in her eyes. "Linda, are you okay?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. She shook her head, her lips trembling. "I can't do this anymore," she whispered back. "I'm so scared, Emily. I don't know who to trust." I wanted to comfort her, but before I could say anything else, Tom's voice boomed from the porch. "Linda, get inside. Now." Linda flinched and hurried back into the house, leaving me standing there with 1,000 questions and a heart full of worry. That night, the tension exploded. I was in the kitchen when I heard shouting from the Miller's house, loud, angry voices, the sound of something breaking. I ran to the window and saw Linda running out the front door, sobbing. Tom followed, grabbing her arm and yelling. Lights flickered on all over the neighborhood as people peeked out to see what was happening. I couldn't just stand by. I grabbed my phone and called the police, my hands shaking. Within minutes, Officer Reed arrived, his patrol car lights flashing in the dark. He was a tall man with kind eyes, but he looked skeptical as he listened to my story. "You say you've seen strange visitors, heard arguments, and found a camera in your yard?" he asked, scribbling notes. I nodded, trying to keep my voice steady. "And now there's a fight. Please, you have to help Linda." Officer Reed knocked on the Miller's door, and after a tense moment, Tom opened it, his face red and angry. Linda stood behind him, her eyes swollen from crying. The officer spoke to them quietly, then turned to me and Mrs. Jenkins, who had come over to see what was happening. "We're going to take a look around," he said, his tone calm but firm. The whole neighborhood seemed to hold its breath as the police searched the Miller's house. I watched from the sidewalk, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst. After what felt like forever, Officer Reed came back outside, holding a box filled with strange objects, old photographs, odd trinkets, and a stack of letters tied with string. "There's nothing illegal here," he said, his voice careful. "Just unusual things. We'll keep an eye on the situation, but for now, there's nothing more we can do." I felt a wave of frustration and confusion. How could there be so much noise, so many secrets, and still nothing the police could act on? The neighbors whispered among themselves, their eyes wide with curiosity and fear. Tom glared at me as he carried the box back inside, while Linda just looked tired and defeated. I wanted to reach out to her, to tell her she wasn't alone, but she disappeared into the house before I could say a word. That night, the whole street buzzed with rumors. Some people said the Millers were hiding something terrible. Others thought it was all just a misunderstanding. But I knew what I'd seen, the fear in Linda's eyes, the late-night visitors, the camera pointed at our house. The truth was still out there, just out of reach, and I couldn't let it go. What was in those letters and photographs? Why did Linda seem so desperate for help? And what would happen now that the police had been involved? As I lay in bed, listening to the quiet hum of the neighborhood, I realized the mystery was far from over. The confrontation had brought everything into the open, but the answers were still hidden in the shadows. I knew I had to keep searching, no matter how hard it got. The Miller's secret was bigger than I'd ever imagined, and I was determined to find out what it was, even if it meant risking everything. What would I discover next? And would the truth finally set us free, or trap us in a web of secrets forever? The days after the police came were strangely quiet. The Miller's house, once full of strange noises and late-night visitors, now seemed almost empty. I watched from my window as Tom and Linda packed their car, moving quickly and quietly, as if they couldn't leave fast enough. The whole neighborhood buzzed with whispers, but no one dared to ask the Millers what had really happened. I wanted to talk to Linda, to ask her if she was okay, but she avoided my eyes, her face pale and tired. It felt like the end of something, but I couldn't shake the feeling that the real story was just beginning. On the morning the Millers left, I found a small, locked box on our porch. There was a note taped to the top, written in Linda's shaky handwriting. For Emily. I'm sorry. My hands trembled as I picked it up, the weight of it heavier than I expected. David came outside, his face full of worry. What is it? He asked, but I could only shake my head. I didn't know yet, but I could feel the secret inside, waiting to be uncovered. We brought the box inside and set it on the kitchen table. For a long time, I just stared at it, afraid of what I might find. David sat beside me, silent, his hand resting on mine. Finally, I took a deep breath and opened the note. It was short, just a few lines. You are right to be curious. Some things can't be explained. I hope this helps you understand. Please forgive us. With trembling fingers, I opened the box. Inside were old, faded photographs, some of the Millers, some of strangers, all taken in our neighborhood. There was a small, rusty key taped to the bottom, and a stack of letters, each one marked with dates that went back years. As I flipped through the photos, I saw something that made my heart stop. A picture of our own backyard, taken at night, with a shadowy figure standing near the fence. I looked at David, and he looked back at me, his face pale. I never told you, David whispered, but before we moved in, I saw something in their basement. Something I can't explain. I thought I imagined it, but now his voice trailed off, and I felt a chill run through me. What had he seen? What did the key open? And why did the Millers leave all of this for us? I stared at the box, the photos, and the key, feeling more questions than answers. The Millers were gone, but their secrets remained, haunting our house and our lives. I knew I couldn't let it go, not yet. The truth was still out there, waiting to be found. What would I discover if I kept searching? And would I ever really know what the Millers were hiding next door? The mystery wasn't over. In fact, it felt like it was only just beginning.